On September 11, 2025, the United States woke up to a day filled with symbolism and tragedy. A date forever marked by the trauma of the 2001 attacks now carries a new, darker chapter. The assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, one of former President Donald Trump's most influential allies. The crime took place the night before, on September 10th, during an event at Utah Valley University. Witnesses reported panic erupting in the auditorium when gunshots echoed in the middle of the lecture, turning a political gathering into a scene of chaos. Kirk, known as the founder of Turning Point USA and for his close ties to the conservative base, did not survive the attack. The news spread like wildfire, dominating social media, newspapers, and television. This tragedy was not just the death of a political figure, it carried the weight of symbolism, striking at a time when the United States was already facing a surge in internal political violence. Donald Trump, now president, reacted immediately, describing the moment as a dark chapter for America. For him, Kirk's death cannot be dismissed as an isolated incident, but as a symptom of a broader wave of political violence threatening the nation's foundations. Strong words, spoken on a day heavy with memories, that resonate both as a warning and as fuel for even deeper polarization. The assassination of Charlie Kirk touches sensitive points in American society: freedom of speech, public safety, and the stability of democracy itself in a country that increasingly struggles to protect its own citizens. For many, September 11, 2025 will be remembered not because of an external enemy, but because of the danger rising from within. What do you think about this? Is America approaching a point of no return? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd like to hear them. Charlie Kirk's death is not just a high-profile crime. It represents a rupture in America's political narrative. Kirk was more than an activist. He symbolized a generation of conservatives shaped by Donald Trump's combative rhetoric. As the founder of Turning Point USA, he mobilized young people, funded campaigns, was a constant presence at conferences and on radio, and had direct access to Trump's inner circle. For many, he was seen as a political heir in the making, someone capable of carrying the conservative movement beyond Trump himself. His elimination, therefore, cannot be interpreted as an isolated act of violence, but as a direct strike at the heart of an ideological current that defines half the country. The symbolic impact is even greater, because it occurred on the eve of September 11th, a date engraved in America's collective memory as its greatest national trauma. If in 2001 the enemy was external, in 2025 it seems to come from within the country's own borders, fueled by an increasingly polarized social fabric. Trump himself underscored this point in his speech, emphasizing the internal nature of the threat and signaling that the focus of national security may be shifting. The assassination also opened space for speculation, theories, and competing narratives. On one side, conservative allies point to a climate of hostility created by the left, accusing opponents of fostering an environment where dissenting voices are demonized and ultimately silenced by violence. On the other side, progressives warn of the risk that this tragedy could be used as a political weapon, reinforcing a narrative of victimhood and paving the way for harsher measures against opponents. Regardless of which side prevails, Kirk's death has already become a turning point, with the potential to redefine the boundaries of public debate in the United States. The crime scene in Utah is now under federal investigation, but what stands out is not only the case itself, but the broader climate it reveals. The assassination of Charlie Kirk comes at a time when universities, state legislatures, and even churches have become flashpoints of political tension. The sense that no public space is safe from violence generates fear among ordinary citizens and fuels political leaders who argue that America is on the verge of internal collapse. In his statement, Trump made it clear he does not see this as a common criminal case. According to him, the killing of one of his closest allies must be understood as a symptom of something larger, a nation at odds with itself. His rhetoric points directly at political opponents, while also laying the groundwork for a tougher security agenda that could include new laws and expanded executive powers in the name of protecting the nation. It would not be the first time a tragedy has been used to justify dramatic changes. Recall that the attacks of September 11, 2001 paved the way for the War on Terror and the strengthening of intelligence agencies. Now the question is whether a new September 11th, this time internal, will be used to justify a war on political violence. Meanwhile, the conservative base reacts with anger and fear. Online groups share tributes to Kirk, but also calls for retaliation. Republican lawmakers are already pushing for emergency hearings on the security of public figures, while TV commentators frame the episode as evidence of a weakened state facing political crime. The space for dialogue, already narrow, seems to be giving way to a cycle of accusations and counter-accusations that only deepens division. The assassination of Charlie Kirk, more than a crime, could be the spark of a new phase of radicalization in American democracy. The international reaction highlights that the United States can no longer keep its crises contained at home. European and Asian outlets pointed to the bitter irony of a nation that once presented itself as the guardian of democracy, but now sees its own leaders and activists killed in public spaces. The message crossing borders is clear. Instability is no longer in the Middle East or Eastern Europe, but inside the world's leading power. This kind of internal fragility has direct consequences for U.S. foreign policy, as strategic rivals may seize the moment to question Washington's legitimacy and authority in global affairs. For Trump, however, the priority remains domestic. By responding forcefully and publicly, he builds the narrative that internal security will be the absolute focus of his administration. The real question is how far this focus will go. Emergency measures, expanded presidential powers, closer monitoring of opposition groups. The answers are not yet clear, but the groundwork is being laid for decisions that could reshape the relationship between state and society. Do you think this tragedy could change the course of US politics, or will it become just another event turned into rhetoric? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective matters. As Trump's administration works to shape the narrative, Congress is already under pressure to act. Republican lawmakers call for swift investigations and stronger protections for public figures, while Democrats try to frame the tragedy within a broader debate on gun access and political radicalization. This legislative clash risks further paralyzing the Capitol, already bogged down in ideological disputes and gridlock. Kirk's death also revives an uncomfortable question. To what extent does political polarization, fueled by leadership rhetoric, create the environment for hostility that leads to violence? Independent analysts warn that, while the case remains under investigation, America's social climate is fertile ground for more incidents of this kind. Aggressive campaign rhetoric, the demonization of opponents, and rising intolerance online all act as catalysts for extremism. Culturally, the episode is already inspiring debate in TV programs, podcasts, and newspapers. The tone varies. Some frame Kirk as a martyr, others as the inevitable product of a divided nation. Either way, the assassination has exposed a dilemma. The United States, long proud of its democratic tradition and strong institutions, now faces an internal threat that ignores parties, borders, and rules. The official investigation moves quickly, but distrust overshadows it from the start. The FBI has taken charge and promised transparency, but part of the conservative base doubts the final report will be credible. On forums and social media, accusations multiply that authorities may downplay the crime or hide potential political connections. This erosion of trust in security institutions reflects America's deeper crisis. When law enforcement itself is no longer seen as impartial, the door opens to radicalization and conspiracy. At the same time, media outlets play a decisive role in framing the story. Mainstream channels present it as yet another episode of gun violence in a nation scarred by recurring tragedies. Conservative outlets, in contrast, frame it as part of a targeted pattern against right-wing figures, demanding a tougher response from government. The sharp divide between these narratives only reinforces the perception that every tragedy is fuel for a broader war of ideas. The result is a paradox. Society demands justice, but political fragmentation turns the search for truth into yet another battlefield. In this climate, Charlie Kirk's assassination risks being remembered not just as the death of a leader, but as the spark for a new phase in America's crisis of trust. Charlie Kirk's assassination leaves a wound that goes far beyond politics. It symbolizes the fragility of a nation that, despite its economic and military strength, struggles to shield its citizens from ideologically motivated violence. Trump's reaction reinforces his role as the voice of a base that sees this crime as proof that America is at war with itself. But the danger also grows that this tragedy could be instrumentalized to justify measures that deepen polarization and further restrict dialogue. The parallel with September 11, 2001 is clear. Back then, Americans united against an external enemy. Now in 2025, the challenge is confronting an internal one, diffuse, ideological, and fueled by political hostility. The question is whether the nation can rebuild around even minimal consensus, or if it will continue down a path of radicalization, where every death becomes an argument and every speech a spark for the next conflict. This is one of those moments when history can change course. Do you believe the United States still has a chance to find unity, or are we witnessing the beginning of an irreversible divide? Share your view in the comments. Your voice matters in this debate.